Good afternoon, welcome back to the workshop. Today we're dealing with fork legs. As you can see, I've got a fork leg in pieces, ready to be rebuilt. We've already done the stripping and cleaning and degreasing and de-oiling, as you can see. Everything's spotless, ready to go back together, more or less. Yeah, so right, first things first, stanchions. Stanchions can get pitted. They do get pitted. This is pitted slightly. I don't know if you can see it on camera. It's very difficult to see because I've polished it to get rid of all the rust marks. But the most important bit of the stanchion is the bit where the seal runs. If the bit where this oil seal runs up and down the stanchion hasn't got any pits or marks on it, then the top half of the stanchion, if it has, it doesn't matter, because that bit obviously isn't going to affect the seal. So yeah, so without further ado, let's start putting it together. As you can see, I've laid all the bits and pieces out. There are a few bits and pieces that aren't here. The top does seal, for instance, but we'll come to that in a minute or two. So first things first then, let's put our piston rod down. So that's your piston rod. That's the bit that, get you in camera shot, there we go. That's the bit that damps the movement of the fork leg, that piston. So we put our plastic ring on it, and then you have a spring underneath it. The purpose of that spring is when the forks extend quickly, if for instance you go over a bump, that stops the forks banging. It's a rebound spring. Okay. So that now can go down the fork leg as it is. So we pop that in there, like that. Push it down to the bottom. You'll see it come out the other end. There we go. That's the piston rod in place. And when your fork leg goes up and down, that slides up. The piston rod slides up inside the stanchion, and the oil flow around that piston rod causes the damping. Okay, so that's that in place. Right, to enable us to assemble this reasonably easily with very little ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to refit the spring. Now I'm only going to refit the spring temporarily, simply because this spring has to be taken out to check the oil level, and we'll come to that in a minute or two. So, next thing is the spring. On the top of the spring we have a washer, like that, and then the next after the washer is a spacer, like that. And then after that spacer goes our big rod that goes right down the middle. That locates in the top of the piston rod, it says, in theory. There we go. Right. Now we have to compress it to screw that in place, like that. Like that. He says, there we go. Screw that in place. Don't need to tighten it all the way down. There we go. Right, that spring now being in place, where I get you in shot, holds that piston rod solid. So when we put the screw in the end, when we do the final assembly and put the screw in the end, it'll hold that tight so that it doesn't rotate. Okay, so the last bit on this then is a piston rod cup that goes on there. Okay, so that's now ready to go inside. Oh, it isn't ready to go inside. Hang on a minute. Come on, get with it, man, get with it. We need to put our bottom bush on. That's your bottom fork bush, that goes on there. Right, now it's ready to go inside the fork leg. So we're going to put that down there. Now what we would normally do is put a drop of oil on that, and the reason for that is because we don't want to put it together dry. So we'll just put a tiny drop of oil on that, like that, just so it's not going into that tube dry. Okay, that slides now in there, like that. Now I don't know if you can see down the end of there. You'll see. Let's see if I can make it so you can see it. That's where the bolt hole goes, in the bottom of there. Right, now before we screw that together, I'm just going to move over to the vise, so in a bit. Okay, so we're over at the vise. We've got the lower stanchion gripped carefully in the vise. I've used vise guards. You'll notice I'm gripping it. Let me just move that so you can see. You'll notice that I'm gripping that where the brake calipers go, so as not to damage the paintwork or damage the aluminium. Right, okay, so we've got our tube, we've got our minor assembly done, so the next thing is to screw it all together. So we need a bolt. There's your bolt. Now on that we'll put a tiny little bit of blue Loctite, because the last thing you want is this puppy coming from together. So we'll just put a bit of blue Loctite on there. I'm not going to put a massive amount on. There we go. Just put a bit on there just to make sure that that don't come loose. Right, so that now will go in the bottom of that fork leg, like so, and we nip that up like that. Now that needs tightening to, if memory serves me correct, 16 foot-pound, 14.5 foot-pound, 14.5. Let's set our torque wrench to 14.5 foot-pound, and that's it. That's it. The fork leg is assembled. There's nothing more to it than that. Very straightforward, very simple. Fork leg is put together, it ain't coming apart. That's it. Right, we'll move back over to the other bench and we'll put the seals in and the last bush and a drop of oil. Okay, see you in a bit. Okay, so we're back over at the other bench. First thing to do is to remove the spring. We'll come to why in a minute. So we're going to screw the top plug, take the rod out, spacer, washer and spring. Right, that will now move freely, but you still need a bush. We still need a bush in top of there, in that gap there. Right, that's this little puppy here. There's the bush that goes in the top of there. Now how do we get that bush into that slot? Well, we use our fork seal driver sealy tool. Okay, so first things first, we need to put a drop of oil on this. Drop of oil down there. Drop of oil on there, way up. Pouring it all over the place. Right, so our fork bush goes on there. Now as you can see, I hope, you'll see the fork bush sat in there. Now then we need to push that into that recess. So what we need to do is there's a washer that goes over the top of it, so we'll put that washer on there first, like so. Then we'll fit the seal driver, like so. So you can see the seal driver is shaped so that it goes inside the recess. And then what we do is we knock that into place with the other part of the seal driver. That's quite heavy, that quite a good weight, that. So we should just be able to tap that into place. Now then, as you can see, that's now bottomed out as that. Okay, it won't go in there any further, but if you look down, let me show you. If you look down, I don't know if you can see, you'll see that the fork bush still isn't quite in its recess. So what we do is we use an old fork bush, one we took out. We pop that on top of the new fork bush. Then we pop the washer on. Then we pop the seal driving tool on. And then we knock it into place. There you go, that's in. Doesn't take a lot of force to put these in. If you're using a lot of force, you're doing it wrong. There we go. That bush is now in place. You can just see it down the side of there. Okay, next, so that old fork bush now can be chucked away. Right, so the next thing that goes in after that is the washer. So put the washer on top of there, that goes in there and it lives in there now, does that washer. The next thing to go in is the fork seal. There's our fork seal. Okay, that goes over the top. Now you'll notice I've lubricated this fork leg and it's been polished, so there's nothing sharp or anything on the fork leg that can damage the seal. Right, now that seal goes into the top of there like that, and again we use our fork seal driver to lock it into place. Like that. Now, as you can see, down that gap now, you can see that seal's in place. Now the last thing to go in that gap now is a circlip. Stop it blowing out under pressure. That goes in there like so, and we just pop that down with a screwdriver. Like that, you heard it click into place, that's it. Or has it gone into place? I can't really tell. Yes, it has. It's sat in the groove, that's fine. And there you have it. The last thing to go in there is the dust cover. We ain't going to put the dust cover in just yet, because what I want to do is I'd like to fill them with oil first and make sure there's no leaks before we fit the dust cover. And that's it. That's your fork leg assembled, and as you can see, it slides up and down just like it's supposed to. There we go. You'll notice the area around the seal has got no damage at all. So there is a little bit of pitting up on top, but the area around that seal there's no damage, so there's no danger of any oil leaks or premature seal failure. Right, that's it, and that's how you put a fork leg together. So the next bit to do is to fill it full of oil. That to one side, that to one side, that to one side, that to one side. Right. Next thing to do is to fill it full of oil. Well, I know these forks take quite a lot of oil. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pour a bit down there. I'm not going to measure it, I'm just going to pour it in like that. You can hear it gurgling away, I think. And now, as you can see, we've got some damping. Not a lot of damping because there's not a lot of oil. But we're just lubricating them bushes. There we go. And there we have it. There we jolly well have it. Right, so the next task is to check the oil level in the fork leg. As you can see, I've got it clamped in my workmate. The specifications state you've got to check the oil level from the top of here down with the tube fully compressed. So what I've got a little device here that I made up. Consists of hypodermic syringe, bit of plastic tubing and a bit of aluminium pipe. That clip there is the required distance from the end of that pipe. So basically what you do with this is, when you get your oil level in your fork leg, you obviously make sure that's clean. Mop it, there we go. And then you pop that clip on the edge of that pipe there, and that then gives you your depth of oil. And if you've got too much oil in it, you just use your syringe to draw the excess oil out. That's basically how that works. Right, so we need apparently 112 millimeters from the top here. The oil is where the oil level should be. There. Now as you can see, I've got this set up in a fully compressed position. There. Clamped nice and tight, resting on a piece of wood. It's not going anywhere, but that presents us with a problem. What we've got to make sure is we've got no air in that pipe at all. So what we need to do is we need to fill it up so it's approximately right there at the top, the oil level inside obviously there, and then we pump it a few times. I'll loosen the vice and pump it a few times to make sure there's no air in it, and then we'll check the level, and then if it needs some more oil we'll pop some more oil in and pump it again. And you've got to keep doing that till you make sure that this bottom tube has absolutely no air in it, because if it's got air in it, then obviously it's giving you a false reading on the oil level. Right, so without further ado, let's get some oil in. You can see down it. You pour your oil in. Like so. Now, I'm not sure what the level of that is. It doesn't matter what the level is. I'll show you. I'll give you a look down the pipe. You can see there oil level. Okay. Now what tends to happen is when you loosen the vice off and pump this up and down, that level will drop because the air will come out. So what I'll do is I shall pump it a few times and then we'll see where the level is. I'll put you back over here like that and you can see what I'm up to. Right, so we'll loosen that vice and put the shock absorber. A few times like that. Right, now what we have to do is fully compress it. Push down as hard as you can so it's right at the bottom of its stroke. Now then, now we put our little device in to check arm level. Well, I've checked the measurement on that and the book says 112 mil. Well, that's bang on 112 mil, that clip. So what we do now is we pop that down side of there, and I'll tell you now that's not touching the oil, so once I drop more oil in it does that. Let's try it now. Right, that's now stuck in the oil, that pipe. So what happens when I draw that now, it should take the excess oil out. Don't know if you can see that on camera. It's drawing the excess oil out. As soon as it stops drawing the excess oil, you know that the level inside the fork tube must be correct. And there we have it. Push it right down. Check the level when fully compressed. Yep, spot on that. Absolutely spot on. Right. So now we've got the oil level correct, I shall quickly show you where that is. You can see the oil level there. So when we put our tube in, you can see it's just touching the top surface of the oil. Now if it was too much oil in there, when you pulled the plunger on the syringe it'd suck out the excess oil. But it does give you a plus minus of 2 millimeters in the handbook. So that oil level now is spot on. So what we need to do now is put the spring in. So what we need to do is we'll loosen it up like that. Now I'm being careful obviously not to damage the tube when I nip that in there. Now these springs have got a big end and a small end. That's the big end. Right, you can hardly tell. You can hardly tell. I'll show you on camera if I can see if I can get it there. That's the same diameter as the tube. Yeah? If you turn the spring around, that's slightly smaller and it will almost fit inside. Not right in, but it'll almost go in. So that's the small end, and the small end goes down. So that drops into there first, like that. Then we have our obligatory washer. I'm just going to turn that washer around. You'll see these washers, what I mean by this, these washers seem to have two sides, yeah? Right? They seem to have a flat side, like that, and a slightly curved side. Well, what I tend to do is I tend to put the flat side to the top, because that flat side of that washer is resting on the edge of that tube. Pop our spacer tube in, and then we've just got our top plug to go in. That obviously locates in the top of that, there we are, it's in. Right, so now all I've got to do is compress that and turn it. Famous last words, there we are, it's in. Right, I'll get a socket. That one. And we'll get that up. Oh, can't use a short socket, need to be a long reach. 24mm long reach. And just carefully tighten that plug up. What I'll do is, before I go all the way with that plug, I'm just going to squirt a drop of oil onto that seal, like that, so that when that seal goes into the top of that fork leg, it's not going in dry. Well, I can't tighten that because obviously I can't grip it in the vice. That's very, 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 very important. Don't try and tighten your workmate or your vice up on this tube because you'll damage it. Wait till it's in the stanchion before you tighten that top bolt up. But basically that's it. That's that one done. It's got oil in it now and it's raring to go. The only other thing we haven't done is put the dust seal on and the cover. But as you can see, that's working fine. That block up goes on the floor. Right, and put some weight on it. Yep, that's fine. No leaks from that. So what we'll do next, we'll pop the dust cover on it. Get the dust cover. There's our dust cover. Okay, that goes over the top like that. Goes into the top of there with our seal driver. Like that. So that's the dust cover in place, as you can see. There we have it. And the next thing to do is to pop our fork leg protector on. Which is that wee puppy. We've got the right one for this side. That'll do. That goes on there. Like that. Somehow. Like that. There we go. So that fork leg is done. Okay. Okay, back in a moment.